and it's a beautiful day. I got the times wrong. So my name's James Robinson. I'm the William Hodges Artist in Residence, and what that is basically a scholarship situation that the City Council put on, and there's a network of being a guest artist. It's like a job for the city, and I'll do a show in the big pyramid over there. I'm working in a really interesting building. It's an old maternity hospital where they used to have the babies here, and half of it is abandoned and the other half has sort of been made into a flat. So I'm a guest of the city, I'm making my work, but I broke into the abandoned part, and that's almost like breaking into an abandoned part of myself. And it's given me a lot of permission to be very messy, primal. I go bush quite a bit. I'm not saying I'm a survivor, I'm not saying I can, tough it out, but I go tramping a lot. And I suppose going to the unconscious, going to behind the facade, behind the structures of things. And in that way, I break image down into some of those core things that artists have always tried to talk about, which is truth, really. Who am I? Why am I here? What's the point? I'm going to begin the visual part and I'll continue what I think of as a mihi, which is basically an introduction, but I'm doing it very informative. So I was born in Christchurch in 1972, and looking for one called Nature. Here we go. This isn't my this is it's South Coast. So I suppose I've always thought a lot about extinction. I got brought up in the Cold War in Christchurch, and that was a standoff, you probably know, between the arms race of the Soviets and America. And my mum was a very political woman. We went on civil rights protest marches to do with apartheid in South Africa, to do with Maori land claims here, women's rights. My mum was sort of one of the early feminists, if you like, and I suppose she had quite a warrior backbone for a woman of the 70s. So I come from a broken home, and that's always affected me a lot. I think a lot of my art has to do with conflicts in myself, you might say. Interior voices, things we internalise about, the structures that make us. For a long time that's been quite a negative disposition, quite a depressive tendency. And I was quite at-risk kid when I was your age. Quite into drinking, even in lunchtime at school, things like that. We'd go, do graffiti and do a lot of bunking. I was bright. I got into a lot of theatre and poetry, everything to do with the expressive, you see. I think what underpins a lot of those forces that create us is nature. What I've come to realise is that apart from my conditioning and my psychology, or culture, because everything I am is a construct from the environment and processes around me, whether that's in my DNA, my genetics, my whakapapa, if you like, but ultimately we're all of this. We crawled out of the ocean to paint in the caves, and that process took a long time. What's painting in the caves mean? It's the gift of language. That's what makes mammals into sentient, self-aware beings. There's this code in the DNA. There's this, what language really is in speaking. It's sign and symbol. It's abstract thought. It's being able to think about tomorrow as a symbol, as a word, or as a process of divination of an anthropomorphic symbol or shape, like the earliest art being in the caves. There's a lot of speculation about what that was. I tend to think that early cave paintings were magical summonings to do with the spirit of the animals that fed them. They weren't painting hunting scenes, they were evoking the spirit of the animal to feed them, nourish them. And I think art still has, and when I say art, I'm a painter. I'm a mixed media, inventive painter. But when I say art, I mean the arts. I mean the humanities, really. And I'm quite passionate about what the humanities means. I think in a digital information age, and very much a kind of performance-based, and you guys are right up in the coalface of it, performance-based achievement, pass, fail, win, lose, self-judgment, low self-esteem. I mean, not everyone can win in this system. So defining what is success and what isn't is really necessary. I have a lot of failure in my art practice. And failure is only a perception. When everything is compost for the thing that grows from it, there is no failure. So I try and employ a really, for want of a better word, wise rationale over my own mistakes. That, you know, I can be very generous with myself and do all sorts of crazy drawing and then later just realise it was all bollocks, you know? It was me entertaining my ego, not my soul, not my spirit. One of the hardest things about being an artist, and you'll see a lot of artists these days pretty much work from one paradigm. What I mean by paradigm is an operating platform, a field of reference, reality. They'll very much, the cookie cutter, paint by numbers. There's a concept, here's the thing that talks about the concept, and then here's it's Lego, you know, you make the design, it's a kit set process, and for me that is an art. It can emulate art, it can talk about art, it can talk about idea and process, but art for me reaches into that unconscious, messy, dangerous, vulnerable and expansive state of consciousness, because all we really have as human beings that sets us apart from animals is the consciousness and self-consciousness of being aware of nature. We are nature, you know, we're a whole system, we're part of that beach. And I suppose in some ways I'm very much a mystic when it comes to art. The other thing about art is it does come from essentially a religious base. Painting and sculpture. They were the leading technologies of the day. Now, we've been totally secular. I'm talking and talking. I'm going to go to something called I spent all morning sorting it out. Okay, I'm just going to play other work randomly because that's really interesting. Which may or may not work. So these are details, these are studio shots, all sorts of different processes. I spent time in New York. I won a prize and had 6 months in a small office building in Times Square. And I really knew that I was a Pacific painter then, mainly because like the complete concrete jungle sort of freaked me out such a lot. And these are little miniatures. I fold paper and then make sort of characters out of them. I'm not the type of artist that draws your face or body. I did do a lot of life drawing. This is all the drawings put together, and it makes sort of an info mind map. Expressionism. Rock and pillar range. Scary New York drawing. Fungus over a tramping triangle. Even the stars are eaten. I wonder if I can make things stop. Yeah, I can. So this is a relatively new one, and I'm sort of talking about, you can't really see, it's quite delicate, but there's gold and oil paint mixed together, and I thought that was kind of a bit of a metaphor, you know, gold and oil. But also that the whole feel of everything is moving, and that, you know, our social terrain is really tied with oil and energy extraction, and that we're sort of at that tipping point, I reckon, of how much is left. So, you know, our social forces in the next 50 years, like, you know, you guys getting to be my age, I'm 40 by the way. Yeah, you know, we're going to live in quite interesting times in a lot of ways, and that's, you know, why I say about the humanities, because apart from, you know, my art being sort of being part of the sort of commodity of elitism, i.e. that has to be worth 11 grand in Auckland, and people respect the ad in the magazine that cost me 2 grand more than they do the painting. All that palaver aside, I was sort of talking about how we're kind of, there's sort of like a grid, like a construction tower there, and it's stitches that are kind of wound up a wound. And these sort of clouds of information that are forming sort of spectral forms, you know, ghost type forms. And that something else is being made out of the information, you know, out of the virtual.
We can see it in real life.
Yeah.
It how, like the scale.
And there's a sort of a crane or a cruciform, you know, like often artists sort of render things into symbols, you know. So, you know, the crucifix is a pretty well-trodden symbol of sacrifice and suffering, really. Redemption. She's making ghosts. I pulled apart all my strainers and made a sculpture in one of my old studios. That was a show I did in Nelson, publicly. That's called Taniwha Minas, bro. That's the Wallace Award one that's all the little cartoons I stitched together. I'm quite influenced by McCann and Ralph Hotary. So I make these big skins and sort of end of the world abstract, tectonics, Fukushima meltdown, abstract. These are miniatures I did way back in the day. Just little scraps, you know, CD size. That's art school, that's real old. Totem panels of the family. Don't know what that is. Yeah, more abstract stuff.
There's a lot of stitching and sutures and stuff.
I pull things apart.
Sounds like most of these balls.
But it's also like mentally, you know, you pull apart what's going on. This is a big portrait of, this one is my brother and that's me, and it's about the size of that wooden wall there, the whole thing.
Huge.
Yeah, it's pretty big. And it's quite old now, but it's I suppose, so when we were a little bit, you know, dodgy when I was young, I got into art, I got into healing, I got some help, I asked adults, you know, I constructed some kind of career. My little brother didn't, and got into trouble with police, drugs, alcohol, you know, ends up in the psych ward and topping himself. And so, you know, of course, that the suicide thing is, it's quite, most of us probably know someone that's sort of been to that place. And so, yeah, it's kind of a memorial piece between, you know, me and my brother, because no one else really knows how we grew up except him. So I'm all on my own now. It's quite strange. So, yeah, you know, I quite honestly admit that I'm quite obsessive compulsive. And all these little patches are me ranting and talking to myself, you know. And I had a projector and just sort of placed them. And then I also sort of did strange things like, you know, make the third eye in the forehead, and this is like a, you know, a siren. So, you know, I mean, I've often sort of, I used to be in theatre before I got into visual art, and I suppose there's always the aspect of performance going on. And to get noticed in New Zealand especially, you can't just paint cabbage trees and corals, you know, no one's going to notice. So I've sort of often amplified a lot of these states that I've been in.
So what medium, all of that, what medium are you using? Stuff?
Well, I very much sort of do what they call, you know, I mean, I'm painting on little scraps and sticking it on, so everything's rough-edged. It's you know, like that raw thing. It's very much. So medium is whatever. Some of it's vivid, some of it's pen. Most of it's acrylic or oil on the patches. I'm gluing it with some good glue. I'm sewing them in as well. So for me to be physical with the art is quite important. It makes it not just surface treatment with mind alone. You know, like when you're doing a woodcut. I don't know if you guys have done woodcuts, but you know, you're using your body, and there's a rhythm to the body, the blood, the nervous system, these things, rather than just being a sort of, you know, like you're not a laptop, you know. I mean, don't get me wrong, I plan and strategize images all the time, but for me, breaking it down and chewing it up is quite important. Yeah, we're going through all the old ones now, it's quite strange. I might get a bit more control on it. So these are like collages. Oh, that's all right with the camera, mate. We've done these.
Done heaps, yeah.
Yeah.